Lewis addresses this subject a number of different places in his writings, and we'll have occasion to note these ideas again as we go on through these videos. But Lewis is basically saying that prayer is communion with God. It is communication with God, and that's the concern. And this may or may not have an emotional component to it. He says sometimes the problem that people have when they're praying for a certain virtue or praying against a certain vice is they try to bring themselves to the point emotionally where they feel that virtue before they've even prayed for the virtue. He mentions this with regard to courage. When discussing courage, he says some people, when they pray for courage, are trying to feel courageous with the notion that if they can feel courageous, therefore their prayer for courage has been answered. But Lewis says what this really amounts to is psychological gymnastics. It's not communion with God. It is trying to reform or mold what we think in ways that will help us feel the way we think one should feel if one is courageous or if one has faith or if one is loving or whatever the issue might be. And so Lewis again and again makes this point, not only with regard to prayer, but also with regard to other areas of life, that we are not looking just to produce a feeling, although there's nothing wrong with feelings. We're not looking to produce a feeling. We're looking to approach God, to approach the Almighty, to come before Him with an attitude of reverence and a sense that we are dealing with something here which is infinitely above anything that we can understand. So prayer, Lewis says, it's not our emotions, but our communication with God. I don't think we should conclude from this that Lewis is ruling out emotions from his life. He's not. He's just talking about a particular aspect of the emotional life which can skew really a genuine relationship with God. Well, one of my favorites is one that Lewis introduces in letter number 8, and he goes on in letter number 9 and discusses it. For many years, I was in a position where I would talk to university students about their spiritual life and listen to what they had to say about the struggles they experienced. And one of the things that I would hear quite frequently was students who would say, I don't know what's wrong, I just don't feel very spiritual. And they were concluding from that because they didn't feel very spiritual, they were not what God wanted them to be. They were not living the right kind of life. They were drifting away into the other realm, away from the godly realm. And reading the Law of Undulation was a letter that really helped me, and I hope helped me to be able to help some of these young people. Lewis has Screwtape saying to Wormwood, have you never heard of the Law of Undulation? And this is the idea that in life, for probably most of us, maybe all of us, there are ups and downs. Life is sort of a roller coaster. Sometimes emotionally we feel a real high. We don't always know how that comes on. Maybe we wake up one morning and we just feel good and everything is good, and we go through the day riding on the crest of this wave, and then other days, for reasons that we may not understand, we descend into the depths, and we conclude from the fact that our emotional temperature is low that we're not a good Christian anymore. And Lewis says, don't worry about that. This happens. This is going to happen in your marriage. This is going to happen in your job. This is going to happen in your social relationships, wherever you are. You're going to have ups and downs. It's part of being human. It would be strange if we didn't experience these highs and these lows. And so Lewis talks about the law of undulation from the negative perspective of Screwtape and Wormwood, and he says, don't think that you have lost your faith just because you don't feel faithful. And I remember this when a student comes and they're down and they've been feeling depressed about their faith, and I say, you need to read about the law of undulation. It hasn't been many months since I met a young man on our campus, and he said he was having problems with his faith, with his spiritual temperature. I said, well, you need to go to C.S. Lewis and the Screwtape Letters. He happened to have read that book. Go to lesson or letter number 8 and read it. And so he did. And I saw him later. I said, how are you doing? He said, I'm doing much better. Thank you for that kind of help. And I thought it would be a good thing as a faculty member and advisor for young Christians just to print a number of copies of that 8th letter and keep it adjacent to my desk. And when these young people come in, just give them a copy of it and say, here, read this. See if this won't be helpful. Sometimes the greatest times spiritually are the times when we feel the worst. How do you think Jesus felt in the garden when he cried out, and prayed to God, and with tears begged for the cup to be taken away from him? Is that a spiritual high or a spiritual low? Well, it was an emotional low, but it may have been a spiritual high. And sometimes those times in life when we feel the worst are times when we may do the best for God. Well, this is the law of undulation.